Hey guys, this is Jason Grimm, Cloud Solution Architect with the Cisco Metacloud team. Today with a quick video on the basics of using Terraform with OpenStack or with Metacloud, our, our deployment of OpenStack. What you see here in the Horizon web UI is pretty much a basic tenant with not much in it. And what I'll cover briefly here, if you're not familiar with Terraform, it's provisioning and orchestration configuration management tool from HashiCorp. This screen over here on the left is the main.tf file, and you're essentially setting tenants or resources and actions to perform on those resources. And you'll see what I've all of this stuff in caps. I've created a variables file here. This is a backup of that file. I've blanked out the authentication information and things like that, but the variables file makes it easier to pick up this Terraform script and move it from one tenant or one environment to another, because you can just come into the variables file without really messing with the code much more, and just change a few things to make it specific to your tenant. So basic things like the tenant name, username, password, and the auth URL for the API. In this example, I'm setting up a public network, creating a subnet, and creating some security groups, creating a router, and some floating IPs. And the next installment of this video, you'll see I'm going to use the CSR, the Cisco Cloud Services Router 1000V, to connect this environment to Amazon and probably another OpenStack environment in a different region. So I've got a CSR image and flavor there, and a CentOS 7 image and flavor just for some example instances that I provision through the platform deployment. So it's pretty straightforward, similar to Heat or Ansible or other provisioning or config management tools, where you call a resource, or essentially a Terraform function, and you give it a name, and this is the name of the resource. This attribute of that resource is the friendly name that I'm creating. And here again, I'm pointing back to the variables in that variable file, so so as little as possible is hard coded and makes this as portable as possible. So create a private network, create a private subnet. There's lots of options here. These are just the basic ones. You need a CIDR, setting it an IP version type. Do the same thing with the public network and the public subnet as well. I create a public router here, and in this example, I'm just plugging or creating an interface in the public router for just the public network. This line here is commented out if you wanted to attach another interface to that router for the private network. But since I'm going to be experimenting or demoing rather with the CSR, I'm going to use the CSR as the gateway for that private network. And to make a little more sense, when you see this deployed visually and the Neutron network graphic, you'll see how things are kind of laid out there. So creating security group, like all the other things that you do here, you're calling basically a Terraform function or context, giving that resource a name. And then the syntax is pretty straightforward from there. The direction, much like you'd see in the Horizon UI or how you do it in Heat or other tools. You said those options, ingress or egress, protocol type, ports and things like that. This first network, I called it normal. because the person who asked me to create this is used to calling it that, but you could call it inside traffic. It's basically just allows anything private to talk to anything private on any ports for TCP, UDP, and ICMP. I do create an SSH ingress rule here as well, and one for 80 and 443 as well. Here's my CSR instance. Again, select an image ID, which is again variableized in this file over here. Flavor ID, key name for that instance. Security groups, you'll want to use the ID of the security group. Even in this environment, I ran into cases where the friendly name had overlap with other tenants. So someone else had a rule called SSH ingress. So using the variables here grabs the GUID or the UUID for that, and it avoids any confusion there. So I create that CSR instance. Here I'm multi-homing that network 1 and network 2. A private network, the public network has a floating IP, and attaching the appropriate security groups. There's an example. Public instance that's created, and a private instance that's created not on the public network. And all this output section, so if you're working with a tool chain or with other groups, or you just want to do reporting or things like that, the output function, similar to heat and things like that, you can output the results of the work and then use those as inputs to the next process or for reporting or things like that. So without further ado, I didn't realize I made any changes this time. Let's see, everything works fine. So syntax is basically, I have Terraform in the local directory. There's a lot of options there that I won't cover in this installment, but the syntax is basically Terraform apply, and it's going to go through the main .tf file that we were just viewing, and it's going to start creating things in order. Before it does this, it's going to do a syntax check and make sure that all of your options are correct and they're pointing and executing on things that actually exist, and you have access and resources and quota and all that stuff works. So you can see we're about 10 seconds in. The whole platform deploys in about 30. Well, that one went even faster than usual. But here's the outputs that I was set up at the end there. And now this blank screen is no longer blank. I've got my public router. I've got the CSR instance. You can see it's multi-home between public and private. I've got a example public instance here, and an example private instance here. Now look at this instance details, and I can see, let's see, project instances, and I was looking for my public IP. Here it is, .47 for that one. And just to make sure everything works, I can SSH into that box with my key. Let's see, SSH-I. Cloud at, what was that? Oops. So, and now I'm SSH'd into my instance. So that's it. That was a quick run through of the Terraform basics. So you can see without a whole lot of work or a whole lot of time, you can create a pretty decent platform deployment. Routers, security groups, multiple networks, multiple instances. In the next installment of this video, I will configure the CSR and connect that to another environment. I hope you enjoyed this, and have a good day. We'll see you later.